Cavalry getting the ball first. That means Meyer Bevan is going to be reacquainted with his good friend Tiny Football Car. Sean Rea picks it up and at 100% velocity, but so is Johnny Dos Santos. Rea's going to try and chip Irving. He's caught him out. It's in the back of the net. Sean Rea! Played in, lots of bodies guarding the 6. A second effort. It's in! Dos Santos! What a strike! Here's Josh Hurd, sets it up on a platter. What a goal! Sets up Peppel. Second effort, it's in! And Erbin Peppel has finally beat Nico Giantsopoulos.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Newsroom. No Kristian Jack this week as he's taking some much deserved time off. So he's made the potentially questionable decision to leave the show in the hands of myself, Mitchell Tierney, and Charlie O'Connor-Clark. But we'll do our best over the next hour to bring you the latest and greatest in CPL news. Just 2 games this weekend in the league, but plenty of Canadian Championship action to recap as well. Even a cup final to look ahead to on this week's show. We'll be joined by Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic in just a bit to chat all things on the West Coast as always. And in about a half hour's time, we'll also be joined by Forge FC's Alexander Achinioti-Jönsson to preview the 2020, no, I didn't say that wrong, 2020 Canadian Championship final against Toronto FC. But Charlie, despite there being just 2 games, I mean, they call it the Bangers Only League for a reason. A few more goal of the month candidates, maybe goal of the season candidates potentially, and some intriguing results and performances, I think, especially as we start to look at the top of the table here.
Every game, man. Every game. There's like at least one moment you're like, wow, this is incredible. It's only 2 games this weekend, but they were both fun. I know the York and Cavalry game is a 1-0, but still an entertaining one. There's stuff at both ends. And yeah, as you mentioned, the table's starting to fall into place now. We've got, most teams have a few games under their belt, so we're starting to see a little bit of separation. There's still a lot of congestion in the middle of the pack, but Pacific stay top. They keep picking up those points even when they don't play at their best. And Cavalry, they're starting to put a little bit of space between them and the 4th place mark as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny. The first game I covered for CanPL.ca was the Cavalry Pacific home opener. And I bring that up because going into that game, one of the big narratives was, is Cavalry okay here? They had scored 1 goal through their first 3 games. There was a lot of concern that maybe with all of the injuries and absences that had, befallen that team, that always seem to follow that team around, unfortunately, but certainly this year as well. Were they going to be all right? And I mean, they've put that to bed pretty quickly. I think it's 4 of the last 5 they've won, and they haven't lost in the league in their last 5. Very impressive stuff from them, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Tommy Wheeldon Jr. has kind of talked about that last trip they made to York Stadium where they kind of got outplayed. They lost 2-0 to York. That was kind of a turning point for them because, again, they haven't lost since. I think even before this game, Tommy was saying we should thank York because that was kind of the turning point for us. And they've looked much better. They've looked a little bit more cohesive. They've had a little bit more going on in the final third. They've been finishing some chances, to be honest, which helps. So they're definitely looking like the deep and talented team that I think we all expected them to be at the start of the season.
Well, let's go to York Lions Stadium now, where obviously that match played out. A match of patience, as we'll get some quotes from Tommy Wheeldon Jr. later. Yeah. What did you get? You said you were field side for the first half. So what were kind of the vibes like down there? Sounded like I guess felt like a very hot one over there.
Yeah, it was. It was definitely a difficult one out there on that turf. It's kind of the first game this season that we've seen the heat play a bit of a factor. We've had some cold games, we've had some rainy games, some windy games. This one was hot down there on the turf, as it always is when you're playing on synthetic turf like that. Cavalry's always a team that plays a very physical game, and actually in many ways so are York, especially under Martin Nash. But this game especially, I think some of the players kind of described it as it being that way just because you're a little bit more tired, you're laboring a little under the heat, so maybe your tackles come in a little bit later, you're flying into people a little bit more, and the fouls and the cards started coming out early in this game. which didn't help. And I think there's certainly some moments of emotion and tempers boiling over. And I think we'll get to some of the implications of that card trouble in a little bit. But it was certainly a very intense one and a hostile one between two teams that have already seen each other this year and have a little bit of recent history against one another.
Yeah, that's the fun in the Canadian Premier League part of the year we're in now is every match is a repeat of something. And considering how entertaining many of those first meetings between a lot of these sides have been, and in many ways how much, I guess, beef, for lack of a better word, there is sometimes between the two sides, that we're starting to see that a lot. Let's pick up on one more thing about Cavalry that certainly has made all the difference recently, which is their away form. Tommy Wilden Jr. has been quick to mention how few home games they have through the first 15 of the season, as they've barely been at ATCO Field, but 8 points already picked up on the road. That's massive for them and allowing them to build things down the stretch here.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And Tommy kind of identified this even before really the season started. He saw that there were a lot of away games near the start of the year. Obviously you play in Calgary on grass, then you're probably going to want to play more of your home games in the summer when the pitch might be in slightly better condition. And it was always about for them just kind of staying in the pack, staying, above the waterline, so to speak, with these away games. Just make sure that you give yourself a chance to be in the playoffs once you start playing a few more home games. And that's exactly what they've done. They've been very difficult to beat. They've gone into pretty much every stadium they've gone into, and they've not really quit in any games. We've seen a few games where they've been down or things have been tied, and then they found that goal that they needed to either win the game or to equalize late. Obviously, it happened in Halifax with the set pieces and Dan Klomp's goal, and then here at York, it's a bit of a storm that they have to weather at times. York has some great chances, but then it's the substitutes off the bench, as we should talk about too. The triple substitution of Irvin Peppel and Sergio Camargo, and I think it was not Elliot Simmons. I can't remember who the third one that came into this game was at the 60th.
Clearly
minute.
Made quite back.
No, it was Bradley Vliet, because they put Jose Escalante up on the wing and put him at fullback. But those subs all made an instant impact, and it's kind of something that they'd planned from the start of the game. So when you see that you're able to stick in a game like that to that point, and then it all goes to plan, you find that goal you need, that's definitely something that Tommy will be very happy with.
Yeah, speaking of Tommy, he spoke after the game about patience, so let's hear from the Cavalry FC coach now.
It was a game of patience. We said it before. Both teams had midweek games. Both of us have had to travel from the West Coast. It's a hot day. I think it was one of the first we've had where it was, the hydration break. So we wanted to be patient with our possession first half, and then we knew that we were going to make a triple sub, which I think is the first time this season. And the pure was because there's a hangover from Wednesday's game, and we knew our subs would come in and make a difference. And credit to Bim getting his first goal, but Sergio got in that pocket for us.
Yeah, I mentioned Irvin Peppel getting his first goal, and a player who, had a lot of trials and spent some time over in Europe, and a player that everyone is pretty excited about within this league. So nice to see him get that first goal. And let's hear from the goal scorer now.
Yeah, no, it was a tough match. You could see it from the side because of the heat. Especially on a field like this, you're running up and down the turf. It gets hot. So we knew on the side that if we came in, maybe the players are a bit tired, we can come make a difference, and thankfully, thank God, I was able to do that. So
yeah, tired is a good word, and as you mentioned, Charlie, a lot of emotions in this one. Both sides having played a lot of football and a lot of emotional football over the past couple of weeks. Both going, of course, to penalty shootouts before coming into this game in the Canadian Championship midweek. So we saw those emotions boil over, and for York United, this has been, with a young club, a bit of a problem this season already. Some of the suspensions they've already picked up and been left shorthanded, and now again going into next week, there's going to be some tough roster decisions for Martin Nash to make, as a lot of players picking up yellow card suspensions.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one. I think they go into Halifax next weekend. Chris Nivikensa and Diadine Absi, are both out. They're both suspended, and Isaiah Johnston is going to be as well. There we go. It's back. Yeah, that's three massive players. So that's three locked-in starters on this team every week in, week out. Both fullbacks. That's not a position that this team has a lot of depth in. I think we'd all say, because it's just, they're such key players to this squad that, at many times they haven't needed backups because they've just played so many minutes. But to go into this game without the fullbacks, without Isaiah Johnston, who's been playing kind of as a 10 a lot for this team recently and been very good, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to do that. And it's just a consequence of maybe getting a little bit caught up in some of the emotions of these games. Again, all young players that, can maybe get a little ahead of themselves in some of these situations, some of these, tackles. Cavalry, a very experienced team, especially at the physical side of the game. And I mean, they're a team that's had their own share of card trouble. They're also going to be missing Dan Klump for their next game, did his fourth yellow card on Sunday. But yeah, it's certainly something that York will have to learn not to get sucked into anymore, because at the end of the day, you don't want anybody suspended. You certainly don't want three of arguably your most important players all suspended for one away game at a very difficult place to go and play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure, Charlie, you spent a lot of time this morning updating the discipline side of our website with all of the yellow cards that happened this past weekend, and this game didn't help that at all. But a game where York definitely had their chances, and we'll hear now from Dom Zator on his thoughts on the match.
Yeah, like that game looked like it was going to be 0-0 until that one team takes their chance or goes after a mistake. We had our chance, and we needed to bury that. The whole game would have been different, and that, I think, gave the Cavs a little bit of life, thinking, okay, you know what, maybe they wasted their one chance. And it was tough because we battled hard. I think we had the better chances going forward, and it's a tough one, especially at home, to lose, because I think we deserve something out of that game.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. They definitely did deserve something out of that game. Your thoughts on, I guess, just their chances, their chance creation, and a good match, I thought, for Lowell Wright. In fact, I thought they kind of keyed in on him a little bit, and he set up some good chances that, we saw those highlights. They probably should have buried.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you could probably argue that York were the better team in many ways in this game. You mentioned Lowell Wright, who's playing out on the right wing for most of this game, which, he's more naturally kind of a center forward, but with Osazi Di Rosario in there, you try and give him a bit of a different role. Lowell Wright has kind of the technical ability to play out on the wing. He can send in some very good crosses. I think Di Rosario probably wants at least two of his chances back. There was that one cross that Wright put just directly behind the back line. It falls right for Di Rosario, and then he skies it. And it was disappointing. That definitely should have ended up in the back of the net. So I think there's definitely positive signs for York, just in the way that they're able to get into the final third. But it's a similar story that it's been in other games, where just that final ball is missing. They don't necessarily score the easier goals, the one-touch finishes, the balls that are sent into the box off crosses and things like that. So I think that's maybe the next evolution of this team, who have already built such a strong foundation, especially at the back and in midfield. They're very dominant in those areas. Just that final little bit in the final third, that little bit of quality that they need, that I think is going to be the final piece of the puzzle for this team.
Yeah, let's hear from their coach, Martin Nash, on his thoughts after the game. And decision-making was a big thing he mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. I think we got in some great areas. Some of it's decision-making and some of it's finishing, to be fair. And, it was one of those games that was fairly even. I think, I haven't watched it back, obviously, but it seemed fairly even. I thought we maybe edged it on chances, but they finished theirs, and we didn't finish any of ours.
Yeah, always a game of that. Sometimes in terms of who finishes their chances, and both York coach and player mentioning that as a big deal. But we'll move on to Starlight Stadium. We'll get Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic here on just a moment here, but this was a match where plenty of chances got finished. As we look in this one, first off, Sean Ray here. This is a guy who's going to now have multiple entries in the goal of the season, because obviously Irving a little off his line there, but that is an unbelievable chip from him to build things off for Valour here, and a player who's really, really putting his name in there as one of the top young players in the Canadian Premier League this season. This is the penultimate, if we want to use even more football analogies, this is the game of two halves, as Valour, again, Daryl Fordyce, captain, getting on there and putting a nice finish home. So, Charlie, your thoughts on a game where Valour obviously dominate the first half, and then Pacific, they can score goals themselves. They came back in the second.
They certainly can. I think Valour will be very annoyed with themselves for letting that slip. I also want to shout out Sean Rea for just how clever that is to make that chip, to spot that Irving's that far off his line when he's at full speed like that. But yeah, Pacific haven't really spent a lot of time trailing or having to fight back this season, have they? This was, I guess they did it against York in midweek in the Canadian Championship with Amir Didic's late equalizer, but even so, they're generally a team, especially at home, that's kind of controlled games and taken a lead and then maybe let other teams back into it occasionally, which has been one of the problems for them. But this time it's the other way around. It's Valour who come out super strong, and then Pacific have to find their way back in. And to their credit, they did. But Pacific are in a bit of a weird spot at the moment. They've had some maybe tougher results. They've had some games where they really had to grind it out. That one in Ottawa, obviously, where they are probably outplayed, but they still find that goal at the end. I think they've been outshot in 3 of their last 4 CPL games. 3 of those games were at home as well. So maybe I don't know. The Pacific is maybe obviously the team that they're at the top of the table. Every team is going to bring their best performance to play against Pacific. Everybody wants to take down the champions and the number 1 side, but I think maybe there's a little bit more that they can find, an extra gear, because they're scoring goals on quite often fewer shots than the other team, but I think you probably want to dominate more of the ball. You want to put games away. You want more of a 90-minute performance from this team.
Yeah, as you said, it is hard to lead from the front. You have to be ready for these games. You have to be, that the other team, as you said, is going to bring their A game, and Valour certainly did that off the top. And let's hear from Coach James Merriman now on a performance that probably they would have hoped would have been more of a 90-minute one.
Yeah, it does show character to come back, but I don't think we were good enough in the first half. We didn't start right. Yes, we made some changes, but that's not an excuse for the way that we started the match, especially at home. So it's something we'll look at, and we need to be better, and we need to learn from it. But then you see the players that come in, and you see the game change and what it means to them and the character they brought, and we fought and we got back in, and maybe we could have taken it at the end, but we only played one half of football.
Yeah, one half of football. I think that's a quote that we'll hear a little bit throughout this week. I know a little bit later on, Forge FC coach Bobby Smyrniotis saying his club played the worst first half of football in their history. But let's what was maybe the difference there for Pacific as they're able to get back into this game, because that's a club with a lot of attacking options, a lot of depth, and obviously they also have Diaz, who scores every week at this point.
He does score every week, and before long he's going to start running away with the golden boot unless somebody goes on a bit of a tear here. But yeah, I think that first half for Pacific, there's obviously a lot of rotation in the squad, in the starting lineup. Diaz didn't start, neither did Josh Hurd. No Dixon, obviously no Manny Aparicio still as he deals with that injury. And they're the team that played midweek, and I think it looked like it, because Valour had the week off. They looked a little bit fresher, a little bit sharper off the hop in this game. And it showed they had more of a first choice side, I think, as well to start this game. But Pacific were kind of caught off guard, I think, with some of the energy and the way that Valour wanted to play in that first half. Pacific just was a bit of a step behind them. And then they make some changes later in the game. They bring on some of their more regular starters. And it turns into a different game. Pacific kind of finds the energy. They maybe go into the dressing room at halftime, and James Merriman gives them a little bit of a piece of his mind about the effort in that first half, and they come out flying in the second, right? They find the goals that they need. They work their way back into the game, and I think the concern will be that they couldn't start with that. But I think given the circumstances, it's probably understandable that maybe they'd be a little bit more tired after 90 minutes and penalties against York United on Tuesday. But again, they still found a way into the game, as good teams do. They found a way to get something out of it.
Yeah, let's hear from Gianni Dos Santos about how they got back into that game.
It's Yeah, I think we had a great team performance. First half was a little bit slow. We come back strong. Second half, we know what we can do as a team, and I think we had a great comeback. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but I think we did good to come back.
Yeah, on the Valour side of things now, switching gears, the second straight game now where they've had a decently solid performance and then, squandered points at the end. Obviously, they still get a result at Starlight Stadium, which is a good result. I don't think anything should be taken away from that, but nonetheless, they could have had 3 points and they could have had a point the week before in Calgary. So your thoughts on their performance and I guess where they are at in their development as a club.
Yeah, anytime you can take a point on the road at Pacific, you take that and you run, because that's a very difficult thing to do in this league. And Valour, yeah, they're starting to come together. The attack is starting to come together as just kind of in terms of chemistry and so on. They've been able to play a fairly similar lineup week in, week out, which obviously helps when you've got a coach coming in that's trying to establish a system for this team. And I think that's definitely showing in the way that they attack, the way that they're able to find each other. And then the other thing is just their ability on set pieces at either end of the pitch. The Rea goal comes on a counterattack because they defended a set piece very well. And then the Fordyce goal similarly is a corner at the other end. So that's something that is massive at the CPL level, just being able to score and defend all the set pieces, the dead ball situations, because, there's a lot of those in this game. In the CPL, as any team that like Cavalry have done it, Halifax have done quite well there. If you're able to consistently find chances from those set pieces, create those opportunities for yourself, then you're going to have success. And obviously that's something that Valour has put a lot of stock into. And I think that's something that Phil Dos Santos has spoken about for a very long time. So now to see it bearing fruit is very impressive. The final stage, the final evolution of this team is probably just holding on to those leads, because that's the most difficult thing to do, I think, especially against a team like Pacific on the road. But that still, to get a point at Starlight Stadium is never anything to be ashamed of. Yeah, and a big reason for that point was obviously, as we said off the top, that some of the wonder goals that were scored. Let's hear from Valour captain Daryl Fordyce on why there was so
when
many.
You're on the pitch, you have no friends on the pitch. You just get stuck into each other, and afterwards you shake hands and show a lot of respect. But in terms of the goals between the two teams, you look at the quality of both teams have, going forward. I look at our boys and even look at Pacific boys. There's just so much quality in the attacking third, so that's why you get a lot of goals usually against the two teams.
Another big thing for Valour, especially with how last season went, is their away form, which has been much better this season. I think they won just one game, that being against Cavalry last year, away from home, away from Winnipeg at least. Obviously, the start of the season was in a bubble, so all those games kind of count as home games, as much as some of them they aren't officially home teams. So in terms of road form, it's already been much better this year, and another solid point on the weekend. So let's hear from their coach, Phil Dos Santos, on why.
I think that when I took over last year, it was the team had deficiencies in the way they would play on the road. It was a team that struggled a lot on the road, and I think we started to see a bit of a shift at the end of the season in that regards. And we have 7 games played, and 5 of them were on the road this year. So it was important for us to make sure we would be able to get those points and capitalize at home. So this was a good test for us, right? The last 3 games we played away was the Ottawa game, and now these 2. And we needed to get something out of today's game, because I feel that the way we lost all 3 points in Calgary would have made it extremely heavy on us. So disappointed especially when you go up to 0, you won all 3, but when you look at the big pictures, you have to accept it. And had they given us the point when the season starts, tell us you get a point on the road against Pacific, we take it. Now we need to also learn how to play with a lead and keep the lead, because it's been a few games now that we get a goal and we have the chance to secure a result that is better for us, and we weren't able to do it. So a lot of good things today, but still a lot to work on.
Yeah, well, even more good things today, as we are now joined by Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic out west. And let's switch gears a little bit here in terms of Pacific and talk about their performance in the Canadian Championship this week. I think this was a club that, a lot of us would have pushed or thought going very far in this competition, considering how they started this season, considering, they had an opponent in York who is obviously very good and very tricky as a side, but it wasn't necessarily a MLS giant or anything like that. Your thoughts on, them exiting the competition and some of the disappointment that comes with that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big surprise. I think, from Pacific, you kind of spoke to them and you could see that in their eyes, it was kind of like, okay, we've got a chance to make the finals this year. You made the semifinals the year before. You're kind of on a side of the bracket where it lines up nicely for you. You get a bye into the quarters. You got to play York at home, which is, it's a matchup that they'd rather have than, Montreal or Vancouver away or something of the like. And then just the way it kind of lined up for them, it seemed set in stone. They'd get a Whitecaps or a Cavalry, two teams they'd comfortable with in the semis. You go to the final, and then York continues to be a thorn in their side. After that first draw a few days prior, York really caught them by surprise. And I think that's just the magic of cup football. I guess you can't look too far ahead, because sometimes the game in front of you is what's most important. I mean, the fact that it came down to penalties shows how close it was on the day, but certainly there's going to be frustration from Pacific that it ended the way it did. But I guess the lone solace is that you got the league, you still got CONCACAF League, and those are two very, very good alternatives, although their Canadian Championship dreams have maybe died.
Yeah, there's lots left for Pacific to play, and we learned this week that they're going to find out their CONCACAF League opponent on June 8th, which is going to be very exciting because that competition gets started in the summer. But yeah, this game was a fun one, right? It's a good cup game, as you said, Alex. I mean, I think now that we look back at both of the two games these two teams played over the weekend, the 0-0 the week before or the Friday before, maybe there's managers holding some cards closer to their chest in that game, putting some more of their stock in the cup game, knowing what's at stake there. But it was a good one. I think we have to credit York for their resilience, right? I mean, even though it is Pacific who equalized late in this game, they're obviously a resilient team as well. But for York to go the distance in 2 straight cup ties and win both penalty shootouts, I mean, it's another great moment for a certified friend of the podcast, Nico Jansopoulos, right? But what did you make of York in this game, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, they showed some great things, because after that Friday game, I wasn't sure what to expect, given they were super defensive. They were a bit quiet offensively. But, you kind of thought, okay, was it going to be another 0-0 goes to penalties? And they just came out and they had to go down, early. You got a bit of, you go down early, you kind of get that punch in the mouth. You wonder how they were going to respond. A great Amir Didic goal. And then they fought back, because that's the one thing. I mean, I guess Pacific this year, for the most part, one area maybe where they've spoken about it is when they score first, they don't necessarily score second. They tend to for whatever reason, they'll play really good, they won't finish, and then the other team will score at the other end. With York, you're kind of wondering, given that their offense was a bit quieter, would they come back? They kept their heads up. You get a Roger Thompson goal off a set piece. A good area of strength for them. You get that beautiful Azaze Di Rosario, header across goal after that, a nice cross from Lowell Wright. And from there, they were cruising. That's the thing it was impressive. They cruised. They looked like a team that knew what they wanted to do. They looked like an organized team. They looked disciplined. You could really tell they were, fitting into Martin Nash's system. They just kind of, lost their heads at the end. It was kind of funny, speaking to York after, they were all so frustrated because they had a chance to go to the corner, 96 minutes, just kill off the game. Instead, went for a goal. Next thing you know, the ball's in the back of your net. That's the kind of learning moments that you look back upon. And Martin Nash joked after the game, it was a better that they won with that learning moment, and they maybe didn't have to learn the hard way. But overall, I just think they're really buying into Martin Nash's philosophy. You can see that cavalry mentality kind of seeping into the team, and they just look so much more organized, more disciplined, more up for these sorts of games, because the talent was always there for York. York has always been a young, talented group, but they're starting to be a little more seasoned, and I think this cup tie was a perfect example of that.
Yeah, York now advancing to the semifinals, of course. They will play the Vancouver Whitecaps on June 22nd at 10 p.m. Eastern at BC Place. 7 Pacific, should mention that as well. That is the local time for that game. Not trying to do any East Coast bias here, especially with AGR on. Alex, obviously you cover the Whitecaps at length as well. Your thoughts on that match, and maybe how we obviously saw them in quite the match against Cavalry. Maybe how York can potentially disrupt them.
Yeah, I think from York's perspective, I think it's going to be all about how they approach this game. Because I think last year, you thought the York versus Toronto game was going to be a lot closer than it was, given Toronto's form at the time. Toronto came out and just kind of took care of business. One thing that was obvious from York that day, they just didn't look ready for the occasion. I mean, the talent wasn't an issue, but they just didn't look ready. And that's kind of been, in these sorts of CPL versus MLS games, you have to be ready. I think the perfect example too is last week, Forge versus Montreal. Forge can hang with Montreal on their day, as we knew, but they came out flat. They didn't come out ready, and then it was game over by the 30th minute. And that kind of happened to York last year, whereas you compare it to Pacific last season against Whitecaps, against Cavalry against Whitecaps this season or in 2019. You just have to play without fear, as cliche as it is. You have to come out and be ready to play your game and not be, wide-eyed, be like, oh, we're playing the Whitecaps. Oh, this is a BC Place. We have to, we're panicking. We're nervous. I mean, York's there for a reason. They've had to win 2 tough away games against two teams that are typically really good at home. They deserve to be there. They need to play like they deserve to be there, because the Whitecaps, for whatever reason, they've been giving other teams way too much respect. So, Valour weren't able to take advantage of it. Cavalry almost did. If York isn't able to take advantage of that, the Whitecaps will win. But I think if York can disrupt them, make them sweat, make them nervous, it will be a lot closer, kind of like that Cavalry game.
Awesome. Worth noting, of course, that Martin Nash was on the sidelines when Cavalry beat Vancouver. Dom Zator, I think, scored at BC Place in that game. There's a couple other guys around this York dressing room that have that experience, so I think they're definitely going to be looking at this with a lot of excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, AGR, thank you so much for joining us, and we certainly look forward to that match. That's going to be an amazing one.
Awesome.
All right,
Thanks,
well,
guys.
yeah. That was actually the only game that happened in the Canadian Championship this week. There were no others.
No,
I'm just kidding. I think that actually, to be honest, I think that actually does a massive disservice to at least 2 very solid performances from Canadian Premier League sides. Let's start with the team that very nearly took out the Whitecaps again, Cavalry. A Meyer Bevan, again, bangers only league. A Meyer Bevan banger. Nearly hands Cavalry the win. Unfortunately, they come out on the wrong side of penalty kicks, but I think a very solid performance, and another one where Cavalry can take some, a lot of momentum from that game.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it always hurts when you lose on penalties, especially when you're leading in the second half. But this was a very resilient, as we've used this word a lot on this, or at least I have on this show, but it is a very resilient performance for Cavalry, who did actually have to do quite a lot of defending in this game. The Whitecaps had a lot more of the ball. They had, I think they had double the shots that Cavalry had, but they're a very good defensive team. They played slightly a safe back 4 in this game with Mason Trafford and Karifa Yao in the middle there. Elliot Simmons is one of the better holding midfielders, I think, in that sense in the CPL. So they were able to maybe force some of Vancouver's chances to the outside or to the perimeter and make sure that they couldn't really threaten too much. Obviously Marco Carducci called into action at least a few times in this game, but in general, Cavalry knew that they were going to have, a couple chances in this game, whether they're on a counterattack or from a set piece or in transition or something like that. And they just had to take them. And obviously when you have a player who's in the form of Meyer Bevan, who's, one of the most informed strikers in the entire CPL at the moment, they're thankful that he's able to finish that with a just remarkable finish. And it's obviously unfortunate for them that it goes down the other way shortly after, and the Whitecaps score. And then, penalty shootouts, they're tough. They're tough. Vancouver looked ready for it. They did very well, even in front of that quite raucous foot soldiers section in the end there in Calgary. At the end of the day, I don't think there's a lot that Cavalry can be too disappointed with. And now they obviously throw all of their attention into the league, which is not necessarily great for the teams that they're going to be playing against.
Yeah. Meyer Bevan, of course, best friends with Tiny Football Car, who again was out this week, but made his debut in Halifax, where you were this past week, Charlie. And I think a special occasion for Halifax. Again, this was another one that at the end of the day will be looked back on as a bit of a disappointing loss, considering there were moments in that second half where it was all Wanderers. They really looked like they were going to get on the front foot and take the lead in that match. But again, just for the sport in the province of Nova Scotia, that seemed like a sentimental moment.
Yeah, it was a massive game. I think there wasn't an inch of the grandstand in Halifax that wasn't just absolutely packed. And I think we've spoken about how obviously they played Montreal in this competition last year, but I think this year's TFC game was a little bit more of an evolution of the club. It was a little bit more of an occasion. I think they had a little bit more belief in this game. Obviously they played, I think, better in this game, even though even against Montreal, they were right in it to the end until they needed Balou Tabla to come on and settle proceedings. But this time around, there were definitely a lot of moments, and even in the second half, where Halifax just looked so much more up for it than TFC did. The first half was a little bit slower from TFC, who started quite a young lineup, and then at halftime, it's such a mark of respect to what Halifax was doing that TFC are like, okay, we have to put Jonathan Osorio and Ayo Akinola and Jesus Jimenez on the pitch right now, or we might lose this game. And obviously, we all know Jonathan Osorio is one of the most talented players in Canadian soccer, one of the smartest midfielders in the country right now. And, he changes the game, obviously. And perhaps rightly so, he scores the winning goal on a play that was set up by Nova Scotia native Jacob Schaffelberg, which is, a good moment for him. Maybe not one that we at the CPL would love seeing, but because we were very close to penalties there, and it felt even at some points in those 85th minute mark that TFC were actually preparing for penalties with some of the subs they'd started making. But at the end of the day, again, Halifax, the city, just deserves all the praise in the world for the way that they've come out and supported that team and really drove them. And obviously it's something that TFC's players and staff noticed as well. So I think they've definitely left quite a lasting impression on the MLS opponents.
Yeah, you mentioned things that we at the CPL didn't necessarily love seeing, and I think the way Forge FC came out against CF Montréal in a game that was billed as revenge, redemption, all of those things. Bobby Smyrniotis, as I said earlier in the show, called it the worst first half they might have ever played as a side. And I mean, I was covering this match, so I guess I'll go a little bit more in depth. Just again, what was disappointing, I think, was we'd finally seen what Forge could do against Halifax like a week before. They finally looked like the Forge FC we'd come to expect, and then they come out in this match and just weird plays. Like from the start, they left so many gaps. It is a little bit cherry picking, but if you look at the average position of the players, it's almost hilarious, because you can see where Milinkovic is right in the dead center of all of the Forge players in terms of the gaps that he was able to find in his average position. So that was a major issue, and they just couldn't recover from that. They allowed a couple of early goals, and it just wasn't great from them from the start. So a disappointing one, obviously, and one that they very quickly get the opportunity to build on. Obviously, we should mention Montreal now going on to play Toronto FC in the other semifinal at BMO Field, and Toronto FC will be visiting Forge FC at Tim Hortons Field this week for the 2020 final. As I mentioned, obviously a very exciting moment for the Canadian Premier League, as it's the first time that a CPL team has made the final. So let's hear from Bobby Smyrniotis. Charlie was down there at Tim Hortons Field chatting with the Forge FC coach.
Finally, we're joined here on the pitch at Tim Hortons Field by head coach Bobby Smyrniotis of Forge FC. Bobby, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
It's good to see you. Good to see you. And there's a trophy on the line. So what is the mentality for you guys kind of going into a game like this?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail there. The most important thing is there's a trophy on the line, and that's what we know. You know, it's funny we say 2020, and a lot has transpired since then. But we've both, won the right to play for this trophy, and I think that's always an important thing in building the culture of a club and an identity of a club, and that's what it is for us. We have two of those CPL shields in our locker room, and we want to be able to add to it.
How do you think that you're kind of starting to maybe hit a stride a little bit, notwithstanding Montreal?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of good progress in the team. You know, the one thing we said from going back in 2019, building this team, you've probably got a 2-3 year window with the team, and we're lucky enough to keep most of the team together for 3 years and have an excellent run at things. And this year needed to be a little bit of a reshuffling. But when you have principles, when you have an identity, you reshuffle and you bring in the players to fill those roles. And I think we've done an excellent job with that. As you've got guys getting into a simple but sometimes complicated system of the way we play. But we've seen a lot of positives. You know, this past Wednesday in Montreal was probably not our brightest moment as a club, but those are going to come along, and I think you got a lot to learn from them. And maybe it was a good little shock ahead of this game on Saturday.
Does maybe that game being a tougher one, not going your way, give you a little bit extra fuel to the fire for this next chance at an MLS team?
I think so. I think there was a lot of disappointment in the room after that game, and not so much in the loss, but in the performance and our identities and our principles as a team. And you could see it across the team, and we know that's something important for us when we're playing. You know, no matter who the opponent is. And I think a lot of the newer players, and we had quite a few of them playing in that match. I think that was the big learning moment they had from it. And if you can take that forward and use it in a positive nature, then it's always going to help in this match coming up.
This football field has seen a lot of Hamilton-Toronto battles, but not in our football. What does this kind of a game mean to you guys, to your fans, to the club?
Yeah, I think it's a great spectacle for the sport, to be honest. You know, take away the tactics, take away who the players are. I think it's a beautiful thing between the two cities. If you know a little bit the sporting culture, and especially in the CFL with the Ticats and the Argos, it's been a fantastic rivalry. Here you have two teams owned by the same organizations, playing our football, as we say. So I think it's a natural extension of that, and I think that's what's going to make it a very special moment, especially for the supporters of both clubs, for the two cities who are very close to each other. And then from our end, it's making sure we make it a very entertaining match on the pitch.
Again, June 4th, tickets are still available. The Voyageurs Cup will be lifted right here on this pitch. Forge FC hosting Toronto FC. It should be a good one, right?
Oh, it's going to be excellent.
There you go, a promise from the coach that it's going to be excellent. And Charlie, some credit to you there, braving the rain at the end of the interview. Ever the professional there.
Yeah.
But thanks to our incredible content team for all the work they did. There'll be plenty more coming out from Tim Hortons Field over the next week to preview that match. But Charlie, what can we expect from the match itself? Obviously one where Toronto picked up a big win this past weekend, but in general haven't been in great form. Forge starting to round into form, although as you mentioned with the asterisks of that Montreal game, it should be a fascinating final.
Yeah, it'll be a very interesting one. You know, it's a team that Forge has always wanted to play, right? It's a team that, you know, it's the natural rivalry, Hamilton-Toronto, as we've spoken about, and it's the first time that they're going to have that chance. But Forge being at home helps on that turf field that they know better than anybody, really helps. TFC don't have the option in this game of doing what they did in Halifax, where they bring Jonathan Osorio on because he's going to be in Canada camp, I believe. So, you know, that's good for Forge, although it may be disappointing for supporters who like to see players like that. But it's going to be a very fascinating game. You know, Forge are a very different team to Halifax. They play quite a different style of play. They want the ball probably a lot more than Halifax might have. So I'm not sure necessarily how they're going to line up. Obviously, you know, they can't quite look past tomorrow night. Forge have to go to Edmonton and play a very difficult game there in their stadium. And then after that, it'll be kind of full steam ahead for Saturday. It's going to depend on who's healthy for Forge at this point, I think. You know, there's been some players starting to get back. Obviously, the fact that they've managed to incorporate some of these newer signings in Razart Rama and Olabi Belewu in defense has been really helpful for them because they have had to play games recently where they had no natural center backs. But yeah, I think just it's going to be a matter of finishing chances because Forge are always going to be a team that creates chances that gets into the final third. So it's going to be a matter of putting them away as they did in Halifax for really an impressive performance in the attack from them, because that's kind of something that was always going to be the next evolution of this team is just putting us away and having your best attacking players produce on the score sheet. So I think that's really going to be the key for them in this game.
Yeah, well, let's chat to someone who will be playing in that game. Is Alex Achinioti-Jönsson will join us now on the show. Alex, a midfielder or a defender or wherever Forge need him at any point this season, it seems. But thank you so much. Yeah, he's going in goal for this match. Wow, that'll be a wrinkle. But Alex, thanks for taking some time out of a busy day to join us.
No, thank you guys for having me.
Well, I mean, speaking of everything being everywhere this season, the 2020 final obviously being played in 2022, such as the world this year. Your thoughts going into a big match though for the club?
No, it's just that you say it's a big game for us. It's a trophy at the end of the day, even though it's the 2020 trophy. It'll still be in our cabinet, right, if we win it, and I think it'll mean a lot for the club to show that that we can measure with the MLS clubs and that we can actually win a competition against those guys as well. And it would be huge, I think, for the league and the club if we could take that trophy home.
Yeah, I think you'd certainly like to be the first club to do so in the CPL. Forge have been the first team to do a lot of things in the CPL, I think, and that would be just another one. But Alex, I mean, you've been at this club for the whole time, pretty much. Just being in Hamilton, Toronto's just down the street. That club is Toronto FC are just down the street. How long have you guys wanted a crack at this team, just a chance to play against them?
Oh, I think since year one, probably it's always been something we've wanted to measure up against. Of course, they're a different team now than they were back then, and we're also a different team now than we were back then. But I think the whole history with Hamilton, you have the Ticats and the Argonauts that got like a rivalry, and it feels like Hamiltonians aren't that happy about Toronto people. So I think it's just a rivalry between the cities in general. And yeah, no, I think the fans and us as players have always wanted to see a game like this, and we finally get it.
Alex, it's been a bit of a tricky season for you guys so far. Something Charlie was mentioning kind of in the preview is the fact that there's been a lot of injuries for you guys, especially at the back this year, where you've kind of had to look at different combinations there. How tricky has that kind of been, where you're looking to your left and right on different occasions, and there's different guys there? I know Rezart's come in and done a great job off the top, but how has that been so far this year?
No, it's been a bit special because right when you think that we get some guys back, something happens, and all of a sudden the players that have been like healthy all year are injured, and then the guys that just came back are playing instead. But I think we're starting to settle in and get more comfortable in the way we play, and I think we've done well in the league the last couple of games. We just haven't. Against Halifax, we got the end product. Against Ottawa, we played a good game. We just didn't finish it. So I think we're starting to get back on track from where we were last year. Even though we're not the same team, I think we're starting to find back the same kind of rhythm.
Yeah, Alex, you mentioned you're not the same team. There's been a lot of changes heading into this year, probably more than any of the other seasons, but it's certainly not at all the same team that qualified for this final, as I think we spoke about on Friday. But there's a few of you that have been around this whole time, yourself and Kyle Becker and a few other players in this group. With so many changes in this squad, for players like yourself, do you start to see yourself as a bit of a leader, as somebody who can maybe help establish that continuity and the culture in this club that was established in the first year?
Yeah, I think it's been important, especially now this year, like you say, when we have a bigger turnaround and we have a lot of young guys and first year pros, and it's important to set the standard, that you don't just become a winning team just because you don't become a winner because you join a winning team that's won in the past. It doesn't really matter what we've done in the past. We got to focus on what we want to do in the future, and that just comes from hard work and think, like you said, me, Bex, you got David and G and a couple of more guys. And Danny, of course, as well. But some of them are off the field and injured right now. But it's important that we set the standard and we show them out in the field and talk to them off the field to let them know that it like you won't become a champion just because you played for Fort. You actually got to put down a lot of work. And so I think that's also what we've started to realize is some players maybe thought it'd be easy to come here as Fort. We've been the best team for that. We've set the standard for this league, I feel like, and they thought they would just come by itself when you come here, but that's not really how it works.
Yeah, Alex, you mentioned that you have wanted to play Toronto FC since year one as a club. Is there a particular player on Toronto FC that you're maybe looking forward to matching up against, and even as a reference point for yourself and the team to see where your standard is?
No, I wouldn't say so. No matter who I play against, I always try to outplay my opponent, do better than my opponent. I think we've had good measurement of that in the past, playing Cruz Azul, playing Montreal this year and last year. Mostly I just want to win the game, and then I know I can play on that level, so that's not anything I'm doubting about myself. It's just as a team, we got to get up to that standard.
Last time you guys saw Lucas McNaughton, he was winning a championship on your turf. I'm sure you'd like to beat him this time, though, right?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Just speaking of trophies, last season for you guys was, I think, as most of you guys would say, it was very successful. You go to 2 semifinals of tournaments. You go to the CPL final, but it's the first year that you guys actually come out of a year empty-handed, as Bobby Smyrniotis has said. So how much is it important to you guys to put another trophy in your trophy cabinet this weekend?
Like I said before, I think it's very, very important, mostly for the showing that we can compete with the MLS clubs in this country and show that we can be on the same level as them. To kind of set like another standard, I guess, for the league, that we should be able to beat them and we can win this cup. And I think that's what we're going to take most from this game. And obviously we want to win and want the trophy, but maybe what it means more than just another trophy. It's not just another trophy in the cabinet. It also means a lot for the club and the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they've extended the seating there. There's going to be a lot of fans out for this match. What will that mean to have, a cup final like atmosphere? And if anyone's maybe on the fence about coming to this match, why should they come out?
Oh, I think, like I touched before, the rivalry between Hamilton and Toronto, that's kind of always been there before Forge as well. With a lot of our fans are also a bit invested in Ticats, right? So they have the natural kind of rivalry between the Argonauts and the Ticats. So no, it's I think if you're doubting coming, I think you're going to miss something, because it's going to be a fun game both on the field and off the field with the atmosphere.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, Alex. I know you got to catch a bus to Edmonton. You guys have plenty of stuff going on this week, so really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Alex.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned, as Charlie mentioned, there's more content to come with Alex Achinioti-Jönsson from the squad. Not as good as this chat, I don't think, but it'll be all right. Yeah. It'll be worth watching. And as we said, tickets to this match going quickly. They've opened up those additional sections, so you won't want to miss a historic occasion at Tim Hortons Field, one of many that have happened over the last little bit. It's really become a great venue for soccer in this country. So yeah, secure your seats today. Forge offering, I think, some flex packs as well. So if you want to see another CPL match, you can get a combo pack there. It's a great way of doing it. But let's look at the standings here. For the league, as we mentioned, some movement at the top. Cavalry really, kind of consolidating their spot in second place in the league, and I think we have a top 2 going on right now. 2 clubs that have kind of put themselves ahead of everyone else. Yeah,
they certainly have. Cavalry have come on very strong in the last few weeks to maybe come out of that pack a little bit. I think it was only last week that we had like 4 or 5 teams on 8 points.
The 8-point tie.
So now we're starting to see things stretch out a little bit more. We're seeing clubs start to establish themselves, but there is a very, very, very long way to go. for instance, I still would not expect to see Forge in 6th place for much longer. But yeah, it's definitely going to be exciting. I think there's going to be a pretty heavy battle for really all of those spots come, a month or two from now.
Yeah, and that battle continues this week as we look at the schedule, and it's a great week if you're a Canadian Premier League fan because there are games almost every day. Starting tomorrow, Forge, as we said, traveling to Edmonton to take on FC Edmonton. You got Valour Atletico on Wednesday. Saturday, it's that York United Wanderers game that we mentioned, and then a doubleheader. Atletico hosting Pacific and Valour hosting FC Edmonton. So a big week for Valour, honestly. 2 home games for them. Yeah. A big chance for them to start to move up and separate from the pack as well. So as always, there'll be plenty of content from us over at CanPL.ca. There'll be plenty of stuff ahead of that 2020 final. And as always, you can catch all of those games on One Soccer. So make sure to head over there and do that. But that does bring us to the end of our show this week. Thank you so much to both Alexes, Alex Gangué-Ruzic and Achinioti-Jönsson for joining us. And that will do it for us from the May 30th, 2022 show. Thanks again for everyone joining us. I mean, we have people from Utah, Brazil, Nigeria as well in the chat today. All kinds of international content. Yeah, it's great. We love taking this league to new places, and so as I said, enjoy a full week of football. It's a great one if you're a Canadian Premier League fan.
Cavalry getting the ball first. That means Meyer Bevan is going to be reacquainted with his good friend Tiny Football Car. Sean Rea picks it up and at 100% velocity, but so is Johnny Dos Santos. Rea's going to try and chip Irving. He's caught him out. It's in the back of the net. Sean Rea! Played in. Lots of bodies guarding the 6. A second effort. It's in! Dos Santos! What a strike! Here's Josh Hurd, sets it up on a platter. What a goal! Sets up Peppel. Second effort, it's in! And Erben Peppel has finally beat Nico Giantsopoulos.